This is the first TikTok I've ever posted, and you're going to be getting me at my most vulnerable and raw. I've been so distraught, I just can't find it in me to put on makeup or do my hair, so here's me as I am. I have a story I'd like to share with you. It's lengthy, but I think that it matters. I will be reading from something that I wrote because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. I've been in the unique position to have the perspective of seeing what it looks like to go against medical advice, expert medical advice, in an attempt to save a baby. Advice from a professional that I trusted wholly but chose not to take. This is advice that is no longer allowed to be provided in some states. It rocks me to my core that some women are now going to be forced to face what transpired through that nightmare. To see the things I saw and to have to live with the pictures I will forever have burned into my memories. I do not wish even my worst enemies to be forced into this. This is wrong, and I have to say something, even if it means having to relive that pain to share my story. This is barbaric. We can't let this be okay. I want to share some numbers with you that I spent most of a sleepless night looking at that may offer an unfamiliar but important perspective that I think is really getting drowned out in mainstream media. My story is a little bit nuanced from what you may be reading all over your news feeds. My ask is that you allow me just a piece of your most valuable asset, your time, for me to read my story and then take even just a moment to ponder the message. 82,222. This is the number on the conservative end of the range of women this year who will suffer miscarriages in the U.S. that require medical intervention. I will post all of my sources as well in the comments. Second number, 3,350,000. This is the number of women, according to NCBI statistics, who are currently alive in our country and will be impacted by a dire medical need for doctor-induced abortions at some point in their lives. I was one of the 3,350,000 twice, not just who had miscarriages, but whose body was not able to do what it needed and required surgeries I did not want but were essential for my safety. My medical records list them as abortions. I've had 2 abortions by all medical and legal definitions. 74,412. This is the number of recorded surgical abortions last year times the rate of abortion due to recorded threats to the life of the mother, baby, or the outcome of rape. This is not the fairy tale some are having you believe that it's going to be abortions allowed when it's determined as medically necessary. Medical necessity is a quality assessment from a decision maker. The problem is, who makes that decision? According to one story in the New York Times, a woman was denied abortion pills from being filled at her local pharmacy. They were prescribed by her doctors while she was actively going through a devastating loss. She even shared her discharge paperwork with him, which was a total violation of her privacy, but she didn't feel she had a choice. Pharmacists, who are not your doctors, could make your medical decisions. According to an anonymous reporting from a registered nurse in Knoxville, Tennessee, a woman was being seen in the ER for a ruptured fallopian tube due to ectopic pregnancy. While she was facing both the unspeakable tragedy and a dire medical emergency, the doctors would not proceed with her medical care until they met with attorneys. Deliberations delayed her life-saving care for 9 hours. Attorneys, who are not your doctors, could make your medical decisions. As seen with the recent ruling, lawmakers in the justice system, none of whom are your doctors, could make your medical decisions. There have been no formal accounts of this yet post-ruling, at least to my knowledge, but I have a hunch that many of us are speculating the same thing. Just wait until insurance companies have a new reason not to pay out medical claims. Insurance companies, who are not your doctors, could make your medical decisions. This is why Roe v. Wade was put into place. Why do these people have any say in your medical care? Don't you care that they do not have medical training or qualifications necessary for making these decisions? If not for you, don't you care for the women you hold nearest and dearest? Please, please care. Care as if your life depends on it, because it very well might. This is important. This matters. It sets an incredibly dangerous precedent. It's not about abortions received because you didn't mean to get pregnant. In the big picture, this isn't even just about abortions. These formalized gangster organizations are getting a say, the say, when you have critical medical needs. What in the quantifiably inhumane and recklessly dangerous actual fuck? How are we not all tightly aligned in our outrage that this is our reality? I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-access to life-saving medical treatments. I do realize that medically necessary abortions are far outnumbered by the other reasons that people seek this intervention. I'll be happy to volunteer that fact first, because frankly, it's irrelevant to the message. I'm asking you to put aside your thoughts on abortion as birth control for just a moment and think about those numbers again. This is an incredibly significant volume of women. These are not just numbers. They are statistically significant measurements of human experiences. How can you know those numbers and honestly come to the conclusion that the Supreme Court decision was fair, just, and in the best interest of our living and breathing citizens? These people are who we should be protecting. Not to mention, all this will do is force the more affluent to travel and take care of their needs. In turn, the poorest and most disenfranchised of our people will have a statistically significant higher chance of serious injury or death and be forced into children they did not want or cannot afford. This is a direct assault on all women's health care in the U.S., but we cannot turn a blind eye knowing how this is going to disproportionately impact certain groups more than others. I'm going to call a spade a spade. This sure does look, sound, and feel a lot like systemic racism. Intentional or otherwise, this is how unfair policies get baked into the system and unequally impact minority groups. Intention does not change the socioeconomic impact of a deeply flawed system. We have to do better. We have to care about each other more. I lost 2 pregnancies, one in a long, drawn-out, particularly gruesome and horrifying way, another during the height of the pandemic, where I had to face the cruel reality by myself in a cold and unforgiving hospital in a brand new state I had just moved to with no extended family or local support network. I wanted those babies. I was dying inside losing them. I wanted them so badly I was willing to do anything, including jeopardizing my own life. My God, I wanted those babies with every single fiber of my being. I don't say any of this for sympathy. I've made peace with it, and I now have 2 more babies to love through it. What I can't wrap my head around is the reality of anyone having to face the horrifying kinds of situations I've exampled, and then have the added unimaginable but legitimate concern around whether they are going to get appropriate medical care. The facts around my cases could very well have been put under scrutiny. Some of these state laws and ambiguities could have delayed very necessary care with a very real possibility of causing critical harm, given how the events transpired during my pregnancies. That's the decision that states are now free to make for themselves. What kind of sick world do we live in that anyone could possibly be okay with this, understanding how big these numbers actually are? This is not something that is going to affect just the girl a few neighborhoods down who made decisions you didn't care for. This is going to impact your sisters, daughters, friends, neighbors, and colleagues. This would have directly impacted me twice. I am not alone. We represent a much larger number than is advertised by those with nefarious intentions and something to sell you. If you're worried about losing the potentially cancer-curing fetus life, please equally consider and care about the 3,350,000 actual breathing, thinking women alive today who are now subject to facing this inconceivable situation during the already absolute worst moments of their lives. This does not just go away if you turn your back and ignore it. This is the reality of what these laws or retraction thereof are going to result in. Innocent people are going to get hurt and die who didn't have to. This is not an if, it is most certainly a matter of when. There's an uncomfortably good chance, statistically speaking, that it will find its way to people that you love. This is not okay. We are not okay. Regardless of your political affiliations, we can't in good conscience say it's okay to actively ignore the strides made for the health and safety of 82,000 women with documented medical needs annually. We have the moral high ground because we did it in favor of a fetus that we don't intend to make any meaningful efforts towards for continued support through life, forcing them to be born into the same circumstances of poverty and significantly hampered opportunities to rise above. See the relentless cycle? We don't feel good about this as a society, do we? Some states have already drawn a clear line in the sand. I'm often a states' rights kind of gal, but that's for decisions that would have varied impacts, where people would be disadvantaged by a law due to the differing needs of the specific regions or industries where they reside. This is so very different. This isn't simply a tax that negatively affects farmers more than Wall Street. You aren't immune to tragedy and disaster through the duration of childbearing just because you're in the North versus the South or West Coast versus the East Coast. Federal laws are intended to cover rulings that equally impact all of its country's citizens. Medical needs for tragic events don't give an inkling of care about your political beliefs or geographic locations. This is a materially relevant fact and one that the court failed to adequately consider through deliberations. This is also in direct violation of mandated Jewish law, so the decision is not even constitutional. It's right there in the First Amendment. Love your creation stories, but also respect your government's foundational documents. In the U.S., they clearly define a line between church and state. For anyone